Hi everyone, this is Ginger with Gingerberry Creek, and today's tutorial is going to be about staining your primitive doll or staining fabric like this. So I'm going to show you how to stain your primitive doll, and then I'm going to show you what I do when I stain the fabric. What you'll need is this general instruction page in your pattern will have the recipe for the stain. So you'll need to do that. It's a couple of cups of warm water, and then you'll need like coffee, instant coffee. You'll also need instant tea. This one is diet because that's all I could find at the time. It doesn't matter that it's diet, just you need the instant tea. And then I use some cinnamon. And then I also, for my stain, I add some liquid cinnamon extract. You could also do vanilla, and I do that because I like my primitive dolls to have a nice aroma to them. Here is my stain already put together and ready to go. So let me show you how we're gonna stain the primitive doll. You'll need to have I always, let me bring in my doll here. I always like to use some paper here that I put on my surface. So I put a few layers of paper, and then I layer up on top of that a stack of paper towels. And so here's my little mummy that I've got to stain. Right now he's wrapped and ready to go. I've got him, and I've got his feet. So we need to stain these. The fabric stain is in another bucket here. You can see that, and I'll show you what you do with this. So I'm going to set that off to the side for now, and we'll come back to that in a minute. You're also going to need some paint brushes. I like to use these flat style paint brushes in several sizes. Just so that I can, some of the smaller ones are for when I go around these eye patches, and that way I can get close to it without actually going on to the eye patch. Now if I do go on there, it's no big deal, because after I get done and let this dry, I'm gonna end up dry brushing it with some acrylic paints to give it an antique look as well, to just give it a nice finish. So, and then I will also have off to the side a cookie sheet with a stack of paper towels for when it dries. And because this is going to end up getting wet, and I want to set it on a clean surface to let it dry for the 48 to 72 hours before I go back to it. So here's my stain. So all you're going to need to do is, we'll start with these little pieces, the little feet. When I wrap my mummy, I leave these kind of longer, and then I'll trim them up when I'm ready to put them all together. So these are wrapped and ready to go. I've wrapped them with the muslin. And now I'm going to grab kind of a medium size brush. And here's my stain. I'm going to dip my brush into the stain. And at the very bottom, I have a bunch of cinnamon, and you can use different spices like nutmeg and cloves. I'll show you on here. You can see that it will leave that on your primitive doll, and that's okay. It adds a look to it, which is neat. And as this dries, the stain gets lighter and some of this will flake off. So if you don't want any of that grungy stuff like the cinnamon and everything on your item, then just be sure not to go all the way down to the bottom and scoop it up. But so you get your brush wet and then you just start to apply. Now, like I said, this will end up getting a little bit lighter. So, you know, don't like dunk it in there, just lightly brush it on and get it all coated. Just like this. I do both the front and the back and make sure the little pieces, the tail pieces are painted as well. So just flatten those out there onto it. Go ahead and on the pattern where it's the muslin, you want to go ahead and make sure you paint on it as well. So see, it's right there. And then the cheesecloth is painted, so it's all painted. So there's one of them. I'm going to set this off to the side on my cookie sheet with my extra paper towels. And now I'm going to work on this one. It goes fairly quickly. I mean, because you don't need to be like delicate with it, really. You just need to make sure it's completely covered in stain. So just keep applying. If you, you know, apply it and after it dries, you know, for like 24 hours, if you want it to look darker, you can always apply more stain to it. So there's my second foot. It's completely covered. I'm going to set it off to the side, and now I'm going to show you how I do the body of the mummy here. I'm just gonna keep applying. Make sure, like I said, to apply to the muslin as well, because it will absorb it. Depending on how many layers of cheesecloth you did, you may need to kind of soak it good. Every once in a while, I like to pull up some of that grungy, the spice, like the cinnamon and whatever else I've put in there. Just to give it a grunged up look. Most of this will end up flaking off, but there will be some left behind, and if you like that kind of grungy look, it's a nice, it gives it a nice texture and look to it all. So I've done that part. Just gonna keep applying. You can use a bigger paintbrush if you want. Just be careful as you get close to the eye patch and the nose. If you can help it, try not to get on to the nose and the eye patch. It will stain it, and if you do, it's okay, because you're gonna dry brush the acrylics on it anyway. But just try not to get too much of it on there if you can help it. So just keep painting, no particular, order or way, just get it completely covered. And there's some of the muslin, so I want to make sure it's nice and covered. But I don't want it like soaky, soppy wet either, So, it's gonna be wet, but you don't want it to be, where you like basically have dunked it into the stain. You don't want to do that. So you just keep applying, and in some areas it may be a little bit darker than other areas, and that's okay. It's a really neat effect if it does that. It looks more, primitive and mummy-ish, like it's been aged. So I like it that way. I don't want it to have a too of a even look to it. I want it to have, you know, be darker in some spots than others. It gets down where you're gonna end up having to hang on to some areas that you've already painted. So yeah, you're gonna get your fingers all stained up and wet, and that's just part of the process. I'm gonna add a little bit of that grunge down here. Rub it in a little. And just keep on going. We're getting pretty close to being done. I try to do most of it, most of the body, and then come to this around the face area last, just so that I can be more delicate with it in that area. And then what I'll end up doing here is changing brushes to something a little bit smaller, easier to manage around those eye patch and nose. So make sure that the knots and the pieces underneath of that knot are all stained. You don't want anything not having stain on it. You want it to be nice and stained up, because he's a mummy and he's old. So you want him to be aged and old and rustic and primitive and all of that. So just keep adding. All right, we're getting here towards the end. All right, so now I've got all of them pretty much covered, as you can see. And now I'm gonna work on the around this face. Make sure that all of that is stained there. I'm gonna move to a smaller brush so you can see that my brush is a little bit smaller there. I even have a even smaller one here that I'll probably end up using too. So if any of the gauze is in the way of the eye patch, you can always just kind of tuck it back a little bit, because you want to make sure you get some of the stain up and under that, so that it's all uniform. All right, so just slowly work your way to the nose here. Try not to go onto the nose, just try to get right up to the edge there. But if you do get onto that nose patch, don't stress out. It's okay. It won't hurt it or anything. It'll just look a little more rustic, a little darker right there because of it. I'm just gonna lightly work around. Now on these eyebrows, I go straight over them. I don't worry about it. So I'm coming close there to the eye patch. Just kind of tap it and get close to it. You can see right here, some of it went right onto the eye patch from where I had put it over here. It kind of sucked it in, you know, absorbed it, and that's okay. I'm not going to worry about that. It's going to turn out and look cute no matter what. I'm going to end up dry brushing over this as well, so you know, in those areas that it does absorb up, it's not gonna be a big deal. So mean, it is fabric, so it is gonna absorb the moisture. So like I said, you don't have to worry about it too much. I would rather it soak up a little bit than to have an unfinished area. I like to pull back the edges a little bit and go a little bit further so that if they happen to get moved, you know, when people are looking at them or something, then, you know, it's got stain on it all the way around. Alright, got a couple little places I need to add to. I think that does that. I'm going to add a little bit of grunge in a couple of places. Just so it's a little bit darker. Looks more rustic and aged if I do. Make sure he's good on the back. Alright, I think I've got him completely done. So now what I'm going to do is just set this aside and let him dry. Now you can see on your paper towel is going to absorb some of it, so that's okay. What you may want to do is like let him sit for a little while on his back so that the front can dry, and then flip him over a little bit, because otherwise the back will get quite a bit lighter than the rest of him. So if you just let him sit, you know, the whole time without turning him over. So be sure to let this kind of dry and then turn him over once this front part is dry, and make sure that you don't, when you turn him over, you don't put him into the wet area on your paper towel. Move him into another area of the paper towel that is dry so that his face doesn't get all messed up or anything. So that is how you stain your mummy or anything else you want to stain as far as your primitive doll. So now I'm going to set him off to the side, and I'm going to show you my stain that I've done on my fabric. I'm going to push this stuff out of the way, get it out of the way, and show you, and pull in my Alright, so earlier I showed you here's what my fabric looks like before I go and stain it. It has a snowflake pattern on it. It's kind of a light cream color, but I want to use it in like my snowmen and stuff, so I want it to actually have a nice antiqued stain look. So I'm going to bring in my bucket here, and here's my so you can see my fabric. I made up the stain in this with the lid. So I'm going to take off the lid. Now the longer you leave it in the stain, the darker it's going to get. So here's the before, right? There's the before, and here's what after looks like. This has been sitting now for about 45 minutes. I like the way it looks. You could leave it sit longer. It's up to you. you could do less and it'd be a lighter stain. But I'm going to go ahead and take this, use my tongs here and take this out and put it in this bucket. And if you like crinkle it up and fold it up, then in some areas it's going to get darker than it will in other areas. Alright, so there it is right there. That's my stained fabric. Now you can really see those snowflakes on there, which I like. You know, it really kind of, they pop off of the fabric now. So now what I'm going to do is run this under some warm water and cool water, and then kind of wring it out and then hang it up to dry until and then once it's all dry and everything, then I'm going to go ahead and iron it and get it ready to be used. So, but that is how you stain your primitive doll, and that's how you stain your fabric. I hope this tutorial has been helpful. Please stay tuned for more tutorials on other primitive doll techniques. And thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye.